This is the Desi Doubts Podcast. Navigating mental health, societal expectations, and identity is not easy. I'm Dr. Sonalee Joshi, PhD in clinical psychology, therapist, and visual artist.
I'm Rupal Joshi, co-founder of South Asian Americans for Change, single mom, and lawyer. We share our personal stories and the most up-to-date research to give you the tools to figure it out one step at a time.
You don't have to do this alone. You've got this, and we've got you.
So, the Desi Doubts Podcast by South Asian Americans for Change. We're here.
Amazing. Who are we?
Yeah, who are we? Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Dr. Sonalee Joshi. I have my PhD in clinical psychology. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a visual artist in my spare time.
And I'm Rupal Joshi. I am a lawyer, a mother, and I am one of the co-founders of South Asian Americans for Change.
So what are we doing here?
Yeah, so I feel like we needed to make a podcast because our organization has just been wildly successful and people really enjoy all the conversations that we have at our live events. And this felt like the right next step. And I know you and I have sort of gone through similar but different journeys. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that I came to South Asian Americans for Change in the first place was because I was new to Philadelphia and I was looking for community around my identities, but I was also looking for people who actually cared about their mental health because as a clinical psychologist, obviously it's my day job and it's something that I like helping other people do, but I didn't just get here because it was an easy job to do or it was something that I just felt like doing. It was really a personal journey for me. Mental health has been something that I have been thinking about for my entire life. And so I really wanted to be around people who valued that and were also thinking about how to approach that in their own right. And so my journey started long before I think the current boom of mental health that's been happening more recently. Back when I was a teenager, even earlier on in my childhood, I started to recognize, I think a lot of kids do, that I was having anxiety and symptoms of depression to the point where it wasn't just kind of the regular bumps in the road. Something was really feeling abnormal for me personally. And it felt immediately shameful because I don't think anyone was talking about it at the time. I didn't know what was going on in my body when I was having my heart racing at times when you're not really supposed to be afraid in those kinds of situations, where I was feeling myself get really sweaty or I wasn't able to form sentences the same way that I used to be able to. And I didn't know anything about what panic attacks were. And so I just felt so much shame about I don't know what's going on in my body right now. I don't really have anyone to talk to about it. This idea of mental health was so foreign, only quote unquote crazy people sought help. So it was just a really scary time. And I spent, like we did in the, early 2000s, 2010s, I spent a lot of my time Googling, are you depressed or are you anxious quizzes on Google, thinking that was going to be the perfect diagnosis for me.
It's 10 questions.
Yes. And you're oh, well, if you're Googling those things, chances are there's something there that's a problem. But yeah, it took a lot of doing that Googling to get me to the point where I was hey, I think I have an issue and I think I want to be able to go to a therapist. And I had to talk to my parents about it. I had to really advocate for getting that mental health support. And even then, it was kind of a struggle. So it took me a long time, actually well into my college years, when I actually started working with a clinical psychologist professionally, and I started doing research and I started taking psych courses for me to fully understand the diagnoses that I had and for me to fully understand how to treat them. And not everyone gets to do that. Not everyone does a clinical psych PhD, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
And not everyone should have to. So I think part of the reason that I wanted to do this podcast is now that I've had the training that I've had, and now that I've had the experiences that I have, I want to bring those together to make sure that people have access to good quality information so that they can really think about how to support themselves and think about how to advocate for what they need. That's a little bit of why I'm here and why I want to do this. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so similar to you, My journey started, I would say, around like 6 years ago. I was married at the time, and my husband was like severely depressed, starting to significantly abuse alcohol. And I was actually doing all of the things to like help him, right? I was Googling therapists, trying to get him on an SSRI, going to therapy with him. And then we got pregnant, and his self-medicating through alcohol just had full-on turned into alcoholism. And it was a really, really hard year. It was like 2019. And so 1 year before the pandemic. And then I was pregnant in 2020 during the pandemic, and just really struggling. And so much shame, right? Because he was so ashamed. So I couldn't even tell anyone about what I was going through. And I was just pregnant and having panic attacks. And I couldn't tell if I was throwing up because I was pregnant or throwing up because we had just had a fight because I found empty vodka bottles like in the bushes outside our house. Right. And then eventually, like, I gave birth. I was taking care of like my newborn alone because he was still very much struggling with substance abuse. And we separated, and I moved in with my parents. And then by the time he was like in inpatient rehab, I was taking care of a newborn by myself in the middle of a pandemic, and I just was not functioning, like, let alone like the whole first time motherhood thing. Yeah. I was still having panic attacks, and I was not able to sleep. And when you have a newborn, you only have very small pockets of time to be able to sleep, even though I had the help of my mom. So it would take me like 3 hours to fall asleep. And then as soon as I fell asleep, I would wake up again because it'd be time to feed. So I finally got help from a therapist then, but it was way too late in the process. And even like in 2020, like, I feel like the amount of information that is available now was not available then.
Absolutely.
Like, I wasn't Googling, am I depressed or anything like that. Like, I knew that I had probably postpartum. I knew that I had probably PTSD and some sort of anxiety problem. But the first step was getting a therapist, which is a process in and of itself. But I wish that there was something I could have listened to figure this out, like, because the info is there. It's just so much stuff to sift through. Yeah. And there's so much unlearning to do in order to start getting the help you need. And also so much unlearning to do while you're getting the help, right, too. Like, I don't think I realized until I was in therapy how much unlearning I had to do. I, like, pride myself on being, like the strongest feminist and like the left of the left, right? But even so, like, I had all these ideas in my head that I didn't put there, like society put there, culture put there. I was blaming myself for my husband's alcoholism. Other people were saying those words to me, and I'd be like, screw you. Yeah. But I was still doing that to myself. And so there was a lot of stuff to work through. And like you said, I wish I had you in my ear at that time. Like, we didn't know each other, but that would have been so nice. Yeah. You know, to have a friend to help hold your hand and like walk into that kind of like door of acceptance of, I think I need to do something. I think I need to make a change. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think your point is so well taken that, like, we both started from somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say we started from the bottom, but we started from somewhere. And we've evolved over the course of each of our own journeys, which have been very different, but in some ways similar as well. So I'm not going to say, at least for myself, I don't feel like I'm quite at the top. I'm like not like totally on the other side of it. I don't have it all figured out, but I've got something figured out. I think you even asked me that at one point. You're like, do you feel like you're like better now than you were at that time? Like, are you confident in that? When you asked me that, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm like, yeah, I've got it figured out. But then I was kind of reflecting on your question, and I was like, no, I've got some things figured out. And it sounds like you've had that experience too, where you're like, no, I kind of got it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one thing that also like draws me to you in terms of like a friend is that you are very self-assured and confident in who you are. And you may not be like the loudest person in the room, but you are very sort of like, these are my thoughts, these are my convictions. And it definitely feels like you have it all figured out. I know we talk about our challenges and things like that, but it feels like you're on solid footing from the outside perspective, which is not always true. I also feel like I'm in a much, much better place now. And so that is just so different than what it was like before, which I'm sure you had that. I mean, you were a kid, which is just even more terrifying, right?
Well, I mean, I think I've talked to people who have had panic disorder just like I used to, and it's scary at any age. I've seen people develop it at different stages of their lives. And I don't think there's a great time to have a panic attack or a great time to have panic disorder. But to your point, you learn how to cope with it in a different way. Success doesn't look like never having a panic attack again. It's saying, I've been here before and I can get through this. And I think that's where both of us are at in our lives of like, this is not our first rodeo. We kind of have the tools to be able to take what comes next. That doesn't mean we're never going to have a challenge again. That doesn't mean that we're never going to struggle again. But we can confidently say that we've both been able to do that work and get to a place where we can take care of ourselves and we can support ourselves through those hard moments. And I think that's what we want to empower other people to do in this space as well, too. I think you and I have also talked about the fact that, like, I hate it. I hate it when people are like, this is the thing that you have to do to solve all of your problems, and this is sort of the advice that you have to take. It's like, no, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. And I think we want to create a space where people can reflect on what's going to work for them. And we want to create a space where it's like, you've got this and we've got you.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I'm glad we have this, because you and I are coming out of this with our lived experience. But you also, I mean, like, this is your job. And you provide a lot of, like, helpful, evidence-backed tidbits. And I think that's really important. So, I don't know. What are your sort of, like, feedback on that item?
Yeah. No, I mean, you've heard me rail against every, crock therapy or quick fix that there is, and that's the easiest way to get me shouting. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm passionate about evidence-based therapy just because that's what I was taught in school, right? If I had had access to the gold standard treatment for panic disorder when I was 17, I think things would have been a lot different for me. And it was available. It was possible for me to get access to that therapy. It's been around for a while, exposure therapy. But nobody told me about that. And I had to learn about that in textbooks. And I had to, go to school for that. And again, I don't think that should be the case for everyone. But if that's getting drowned out by, like, other information, like, and exposure therapy is also not something that everyone always wants to do. So that, it's just important that people have access to, like, this is what the research says and this is how it can help you so that they can make the decision that's right for them. I think that's it. I also want to kind of come back to something that you were saying about just, like, the availability of information. You talked a little bit in your story about how you spent a lot of time advocating for your husband, and a lot of your context of mental health was around another person. And I was sort of reflecting that, like, I learned about mental health through fictional books and through characters and through, the limited information there was online. So I feel like there's so much social relating that happens, social comparison that happens around mental health. And again, at the times when we were looking at that stuff, that was kind of limited. Now that's exploded. You're comparing your mental health symptoms to everyone else's mental health symptoms. And you're saying, does that look right? Does that fit? Does that meet this diagnosis? And that's overwhelming. That's just so hard. Like, I can't imagine figuring out my symptoms in that kind of context.
Yeah, I think, and it depends on your personality, but for me, like, I'm the type of person that digs in. So I probably would have dug in for, like, a while, but then I would have been like,
yeah,
I'm going to ignore this because it's too hard.
It's overwhelming. It's like, it feels like an impossible hurdle. And I think what we want to do here is we want to kind of help folks find that first place to start, whatever that looks like to them. Again, I think the more you can kind of take something from this and chew on it and go like, where do I need to do that self-assessment for myself? Where do I notice my anxiety? Where do I notice my depression? Where do I notice symptoms that aren't as widely talked about, addiction issues, anything like that? And where do I want to grow? What do I want my life to look like? And I think we want to empower people to kind of do that reflection for themselves and then kind of have us to cheer them on, to back them up, and to provide them with some good information about how they might deal with those things.
Yeah. You've got this and we got you.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
So I think that's sort of what our listeners can expect this season, right? Is us walking the journey with them, talking about really important questions like what kind of providers are available and what the difference are between them. Some talk about medication. We have a great episode on self-love. We're going to be talking about platonic friendships and like support systems that you may need. And really just taking things in bite-sized pieces so that way it doesn't feel so overwhelming and it feels like we're moving forward together.
And together. I think that's the key word there, because another big piece of this podcast and the reason that we're doing it is our culture and our community, right? And I think when we talk about our mental health journeys, even just talking about our own, like it just, I felt so isolated when I was going through that. And I didn't really have a lot of people to turn to. And I thought I had to figure that out by myself, or like, you know, my parents were there and I'm so grateful that they were open and supportive, but it was a really lonely journey. And I think one of the superpowers of our culture and our community is the fact that we can have each other's backs in this, and that we can really come together and say, hey, I need a friend. Hey, I need a loved one. Hey, I need my therapist. Like, that's part of your community too. Like, I think each one of our episodes this season is really focused on how do you think about what you need, how do you be there for other people, and how do you use community to support you through your mental health journey.
Yeah. I think one of the other things I like that we do a little bit as well is like we do talk about how community and culture, there might be some cognitive dissonance there with some of the concepts we talk about, but just because there is some conflict and dissonance doesn't mean that you completely reject one side and accept the other. Right. Like, we can still be Indian or South Asian and proud of our culture, but we don't need to accept the stigma that, you know, we may have grown up with around mental health. Yeah. Like, rejecting that doesn't necessarily mean you're rejecting all of the other good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just a Western concept, or it doesn't mean that you're, you know, rejecting important parts of who you are to be seeking help in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to grow stronger together as a community and as a culture by being as healthy and optimized in our brains as we can.
Right.
Yeah.
But also on the flip side of that too, and I think this is important to say, I think, again, Western medicine hasn't always gotten it right by people of color and by our community especially. And so I imagine that there are people who are listening, and I know I've had the experience where I've gone to see my own therapist or I've seen a provider, and they've just not really understood where I was coming from culturally, and it just didn't fit. And so we also kind of want to talk about, like, how do you make space for those identities? Or like in my case, how do I make space for my queerness? How do I make space for my Indianness? How do I make space for my science brain, my art brain? Like, how do I make space for all of these things within the context of my mental health journey? Yeah. So we also want to think about, like, how are the systems that we're working in serving us as well?
Yeah. And I think that is what's so unique about this, right? Because we're making space for all of that. Whereas, at least for me, when I was consuming content about this particular subject, I would have to take a lot of different pieces from a lot of different places to sort of fit my scenario. So I hope that, you know, the people that are listening to this feel really heard and seen and validated, and just like a warm hug, knowing that, you know, we may not be the same as everybody, right? Like, we're all different, but we have gone through this journey, and I want to share that and help other people do the same thing. Get to like the self-assuredness that we are at right now. We don't have it all figured out, but we're doing a little bit better than before.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the motto here is we're doing a little bit better than before. And that's where we want everyone to be is like just a little bit better, whatever better means to you than before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the bottom line is we wanted to do this because we feel like people shouldn't have to go through this alone, right? Yeah. People like us should not have to go through this alone. I don't think we can speak for everyone. I don't think we can, you know, our stories reflect the stories of every single person on the earth, but there are people who need to hear our voices. And so that's one of the reasons that we chose to do this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think it's important to also note that the way that we're doing this is really intentional. Mm-hmm. And something that you always say, which I like, is that like context matters. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way that we're doing this is, you know, these are the 5 signs of anxiety. And if you have these 5 signs, like you're anxious. Like we are doing the complete opposite of that. We are arming people with information and tools, but also not simplifying the really, really complex issue of like a mental health diagnosis for someone, but at the same time, providing support.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think one of the things that I was just thinking about is like this podcast hopefully will be a perfect blend of that real lived experience and that context that you were talking about with informed evidence-based information. I hope that listening through this season, you will find that you can trust us and you can trust that we're doing the work to make sure that the information that we're providing has some basis to it and comes from somewhere. And it's not just, you know, being pulled out of a hat. And then you can figure out how that works for you and tailor that to your own experience. So I really hope you'll join us for the rest of the season and think about how this relates to your own mental health journey.
Yeah, and one thing that we would love is for you all to engage with us and chat with us. You can send us an email at desidoubtspod@SAAForChange.org or also join us on our Instagram, which is at DesiDoubtsPod. Send us a voice note, send us a message. We really want this to be an actual conversation. And so we'd love to hear from you. Sonalee mentioned earlier that all of our info or a lot of our info is going to be supported by evidence-backed information. We're going to be having citations, resources, all that types of good stuff in the show notes and also on our social media page. So we are really excited to get this info out there and move forward together.
Yeah. So let us know what you want to hear and we'll see you next time. The Desi Doubts Podcast is a production of South Asian Americans for Change, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health care or therapy. Desi Doubts is hosted by Dr. Sonalee Joshi and Rupal Joshi. Desi Doubts is produced by Kirti Chanarasappa, Nima Nardoni, Megha Pathak, and Nitya Cherakuru. It's edited and mixed by Ravi Ray, and it's filmed at ADF Creative, and our theme music is by Rianjali. For questions and comments, email us at desidoubtspod@SAAFforChange.org and follow us at DesiDoubtsPod on Instagram. If you enjoyed the episode or are feeling extra kind, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify.